It's a new year on Deep Space Nine, and people are already pooping yellow all over the place. In this case, it's to sweep for a changeling, us now favouring a wide beam over the balls we used on the Defiant last season, and we find them in one of our guest quarters. Not quickly enough, though, as they change into a bird and scarper to the promenade. More bodies arrive, all of them in pairs, though Bashir orders his partner away because reasons. Those reasons are so that Odo can collar Bashir and call him dead, this being a practice drill to try and find changelings with Odo as the target. O'Brien might have got him in the end, but that doesn't make Bashir any less dead. Personally, I'd have just turned myself into a neurotoxin and shoved myself through the vents, but maybe I'm a bigger bastard. The drill is concluded, and Sisko doesn't like that it took them over 3 hours to win, but he's not going to let it bother him tonight, not when he's got a dinner date. Cassidy Yates is back on the station, and it's serious enough for them to get smartened up and exchange gifts. They chat a little before their meal, during which we learn DS9's installing some new toys, and the Cardigans have been rather quiet of late, but the chance to eat doesn't come as Dax calls Sisko to ops. She has a fair reason, what with a Klingon ship appearing just outside the station, and we receive a call from General Martok. Or, to give him his full name now that he's been adopted by a patron of the channel, meet Martok, husband of Cirella, sponsored by Admiral M. Rowland. Martok, husband of Cirella, is here to give his lads some shore leave, and Sisko agrees. Perhaps he should have asked how many first, as it would appear we're going to have rather more visitors than he anticipated. A large crowd of Klingons would normally be cause for concern, their warriors having a deserved reputation for being a bit on the boisterous side, but what we get is quite the opposite, and that has Quark even more worried than the alternative. Perhaps this is them in high alert mode, Martok insisting that Sisko and Kira prove they're not changelings before he speaks to them would suggest they're not taking chances. Maybe that's influencing what he says, too, as he tells Sisko that the Klingon High Council sent him and his fleet here to protect it from the Dominion. It's the first Sisko's heard of it, though, and there's no indication of anything kicking off, which might explain why Kira doesn't look entirely convinced. There are Klingons on the promenade, and I note they're all in pairs. They seem to be taking the changeling threat more seriously than most, certainly more seriously than plain simple Garak, but then he is having lunch with one. Odo's even mimicking a cup of coffee to make it feel more like he's taking part. Talk turns to news on Cardassia, or more accurately, the complete lack of it. They've closed their borders and Odo's heard nothing since, but plain simple Garak has other means and is disturbed by the rumours of public disorder he's heard. Speaking of disorder, a trio of Klingons have taken it into their heads to start searching people on the promenade, and pissing all over my observation of them being in pairs in the process. Regardless of how many there are, they don't care much for being told by Odo to bugger off, and plain simple Garak lending moral support isn't well received either, so much so that a few Klingons turn up at his shop later and kick the shit out of him. Bashir fixes him up, but can't convince him to make a formal complaint. Either he doesn't want the attention, or he's decided it's going to be more fun organising 5 unrelated accidents. As if things aren't bad enough, we're now getting a call from Cassidy Yates's freighter. She says she's being attacked before the call cuts off, so Sisko nips over there in the Defiant to see what the bloody hell's going on. The short answer is Klingons. The long answer is Klingons who've been ordered to stop any ship coming out of Bajoran space and make sure they're clear of changelings, whether that ship wants it or not. Kira telling them they have no authority does nothing, but Sisko threatening to poop some yellow on their ship does the trick. They bugger off after making it known that they're very unhappy indeed. Once back on DS9, we learn that some Klingon ships have moved out of Bajoran space, meaning we'll have no jurisdiction if they try and pull that shit again. We also learn that Martok, husband of Cirella, is equally displeased at what happened, though he took his displeasure out on the captain of the ship we shooed away by making him do it dead. Other Klingon captains in the future will be somewhat less inclined to listen to us as a result. The solution, thinks Sisko, is to add more Klingons. Lieutenant Commander Worf is large and strong, and has had the shit beaten out of him so many times that they named a literal trope after him. Perhaps that's why he tells Sisko he's been seriously considering his resignation from Starfleet. Maybe he reached the conclusion that this was the only way to stop getting his ass handed to him. He's still Starfleet for now, though, so he'll do what he can, and what Sisko needs is the real reason Martok, husband of Cirella, is here with so many ships. Worf thinks the way to do this is by visiting Quarks, though this does also give him the chance to meet most of the other main cast. He already knows about one of them, sort of, as Curzon Dax negotiated with the Klingons and earned their respect. He's not here to mingle, though, so let's get back to the plot. The lad who was getting handsy on the promenade earlier, and who fucked up plain simple Garak afterwards, arrives at Quarks. Worf goes to introduce himself, and we learn that Drex here is Martok's son. We also learn that Worf's introductions involve fists and nicking his knife when he fights back. The reason is to get Martok, husband of Sirella, to come to Worf's quarters and take it back. Worf hands it over without complaint, as the whole point was talking to Martok. Well, and putting Drex in his place because he's a piece of shit coward who needed 4 backup Klingons to take on a tailor. Curiously, Martok doesn't deny this, and instead asks what Worf thinks of him. Not a lot based on the actions of his troops, but Worf says it'd be easier to understand if there was a good reason. Calling him out on it seems to have been the right choice, as Martok doesn't take issue. Perhaps he's bothered by the orders too, but they come directly from Gowron, and he can't share them beyond saying they're very important, honest. Having won a fight has clearly cheered Worf up, as he's in a holosuite wailing on a skull-faced lad. I wonder if it was a teleporter accident. Dax joins him, and we learn the program is hers, though apparently not a private one. They have a bit of a wrestle with some metal, and Dax eventually ends up on her ass, but it makes Worf open up about getting nothing useful from Martok or any of his other contacts back on Kronos. That's worrying, as those contacts include Gowron himself and Worf's own brother. Dax has a different idea, though, and wonders if there's anybody who owes him a debt. The debt in question was to his father, it seems, and the Klingon that debt is attached to still requires getting shit-faced before he talks. But talk he does, and the result is clearly something that bothers Worf. That's a position Odo can understand. He's had to choose loyalties before, and observing that Worf has stopped looking for an answer suggests he's found one he's reluctant to share. Ultimately, he's going to have to choose, though the fact he's now listed as a main cast member in the titles kinda gives us a clue. Sisko is somewhat surprised to learn the Klingons are going to invade Cardassia, and even more so at the rumours there's been a civilian uprising there that's overthrown the Central Command, Cardassia's military arm. This is followed by a third surprise at rumours that the whole thing was orchestrated by the Founders. That's why the Klingons want to go and kaboom it all, just to be sure. Martok, husband of Sirella, is equally surprised when he's told that Sisko knows all about the plan. There's yet more surprise when he's told the Federation won't take part in it, and any attack could bugger up the peace agreement between them. That's something Martok says the Klingons don't want, so he pops back to his ship to call Gowron. At least, that's what he says. In reality, the entire fleet buggers off as soon as he gets back to it, and they're heading straight for Cardassia, but we'll have to wait and see how that turns out, as this story is to be continued. A new season, then, and new problems to deal with. The Klingons have formerly been quiet on the subject of the Dominion, which is odd for a species who enjoy a good fight, now that I think about it. That we've not previously had an episode about a task force of Klingon ships popping through the wormhole to give the Jem'Hadar a good kicking, or die in the process, is notable in its absence. They're not the sort of people to let a challenge go unanswered, and I'd be inclined to assume they had at least one ship on the list of destroyed vessels that got delivered to us at the end of Season 2. Regardless, they're here now and making up for lost time, albeit in an unexpected direction. Or perhaps that direction shouldn't be so unexpected. The Obsidian Order got its head ripped off last season, and they were the body responsible for keeping the population of Cardassia compliant. We know there's been some public disquiet towards the central command of the military for a while, something not stopped by the Obsidian Order. Whether that was because they couldn't, or chose not to due to their rivalry, is another matter. Either way, the departure of the Obsidian Order would be a clear green light for any dissatisfied parties to let that be known, and we've had indications of friction between the Central Command and civilian Detapa Council before, the body that's in charge on paper, but somewhat less so in practice. That situation could easily change, though, if the civilian council has the backing of a now emboldened public, and that's before you consider how many members of the military could be persuaded to support the council in exchange for shiny promotions and even shinier pensions. Maybe a handful even genuinely agree with the cause, like the legate we met last season. Maybe. all of which would be deeply concerning to anybody looking for founder influence, whether it's there or not. Anything that even looks out of place is going to get weapons pointed at it, so an uprising amongst a population renowned for how much they value personal sacrifice and dedication to the state, regardless of how accurate that image actually is, would be a massive red flag. If it is a genuine change of government, they've got bloody awful timing. We'll leave the rest of that conversation for part 2, shall we, when we know a little more? We've a few other things to discuss right now. The most obvious is the addition of a new main cast member. I'm not sure I agree with the idea that we needed more people in an already well-rounded cast, but I can understand the business decision behind adding someone from TNG given its popularity, and at least it wasn't Wesley. That said, a disillusioned Worf struggling to find his path does give us some interesting options going forward. As I said during the Voyager reviews, happy, well-adjusted characters are the most boring. Looking at you, Harry Kim. Speaking of changes, we've had a couple of unmentioned promotions among the main cast too. Dax is a lieutenant commander now, and Bashir a full lieutenant. Maybe they decided to keep it quiet after the last publicised promotion on DS9 nearly started a war. Or maybe they've been replaced by founders. That would explain all the haircut changes between seasons as well. Let's end on a largely incidental thing then by talking about Odo and Plain Simple Garak having lunch together. That's interesting enough on its own, of course, the two of them having bonded somewhat after the events of last season's best story, in my opinion, but that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the coffee cup. Odo creates a copy of a coffee cup, complete with fluid, so that he can pretend to drink it while in the company of others doing the same, and that's a fascinating choice. It's not the first affectation, of course, as he's not actually wearing clothes, but it's a new direction of creating more incidental detail beyond the basics of not being nude. The first question there is, who is this for? Previously, I'd have said it's something done purely for those around him, an attempt to fit in, but now that's not the only possibility. We've been made aware that Odo actually derives pleasure from shapeshifting, so perhaps there's an added level of satisfaction in making a convincing copy. There's another question here, though. Why is he having this conversation with Plain Simple Garak? The answer, perhaps, is that he's the person on the station that can best understand the skill required in maintaining a facade, the one who can appreciate a well-crafted fiction. Maybe that's the connection. Lunch with Bashir is where Plain Simple Garak plays games with the truth. Lunch with Odo is now giving him a place to discuss the rules of those games, a study of the technical aspects of misdirection with somebody who understands the how and the why of it all. Their shared desire to go home may be the most obvious similarity between them, but it is far from the only one. End of episode.
Well, at least we know who did it now.
Are you absolutely sure it's Astro Chien?
Mate, it's obvious. He's just wearing glasses and a tash. I can't believe it's fooled you.
Not to cast aspersions on your deductive skills, but I'm literally programmed to recognize faces and I can't see it.
That's because you're using set parameters. Life's not like that.
I fail to see the difference.
Alright, what if I do this?
Holy shit, who the hell are you? What did you do with Space Dog?
It's me, dickhead. I can't believe facial recognition is still shit in future. Shouldn't you fixed all this by now?
I'll have you know my facial recognition software was written by the finest minds in Starfleet security.
Ah, that'll explain it then. Woof.